aging strong versus aging weak. And the last two sections of your book are how to move and how to recover.
Recovery is actually part of the growth process. If you don't figure out where your limits are, your brain has to keep up with your body. Otherwise, you're gonna lift heavy and you haven't lifted for 10 years and you've just blown out your shoulder. My teeth started getting loose and my hair started falling out. I just couldn't keep it together. But it takes a level of skill I didn't have. In front of you is the perfect manual for the body of your dreams. As we think about the health and wellness landscape, it has to be a community effort, and that's what actually moves the needle. And it's not about any one individual. It's not about any one perfect program or any one perfect meal. It's about the collective.
Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, thank you so much for being on the Impact Community Podcast.
Thank you so much for, number one, being here, but number two, providing amazing food and support to the book launch party. It was really special, and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. So muscle-centric medicine. There's concepts that come around every 5-10 years, and you hear them, and it's almost like, how did we miss this? Where did we go wrong? It seems like common sense. And this concept that you've really brought to the mainstream, how did this evolve for you over the many years that you've been thinking about this?
Yeah, just like you think about how do you build impact and your business, I will never forget when the moment muscle-centric medicine was born, by the way. I've spent many years in school, way too many. I don't recommend anyone do that. And I was in my fellowship at WashU in St. Louis, and I was doing two parts to this fellowship. It was nutritional sciences on one end, because that was my passion. I had been lucky enough to do an undergraduate in nutritional sciences and have just an incredible mentor. So I knew I had to learn more about nutrition. But the deal was I had to study geriatrics. And it was not my first choice, and it probably wasn't even on the list at all. And for those people who don't know, geriatrics is the study of really people over the age of 65. And the reason that I wasn't interested in it is it's really hard to face our mortality. And it's hard to face end-of-life care. It's hard to face these challenges of aging. But part of my job as a fellow was to run a memory clinic. And we were going to look at, every fellow has a project, the connection between body composition and brain function. This idea of type 3 diabetes of the brain, like everyone's talking about insulin resistance in the brain. And I imaged this one woman's brain. She was in her mid-50s, and I loved her as a human, and her brain looked like the beginning of an Alzheimer's brain. And I thought to myself, how do we miss this? She's doing everything right. She's eating less and exercising more, and she still struggled with those same 20 to 30 pounds her whole life. She'd lose it, gain it, lose it, and gain it. And in the process of this never-ending hamster wheel, she destroyed her metabolism, and her brain was affected. And it was at that moment I was like, I would go to the professors and say, how is, I don't understand. And they said, well, this is just the way that it is, and these are the recommendations. It's we think about the food guide pyramid, and these are our dietary recommendations, and it's 150 minutes of activity. And I thought to myself, we are totally missing it. This cannot be right. This cannot be the right lens. And it was at that moment, I had already been studying muscle and protein for years. I just had this flash of insight that it wasn't a fat problem that we were looking at, but it was a muscle problem. And then I started to connect the dots that when we think about muscle, it's all related to performance. I mean, who cares about that? It's great, it's important, but what about the real health outcomes beyond athleticism, like blood sugar regulation, like blood pressure, like triglycerides and cholesterol? And I realized that organ system, the main organ system under our voluntary control, in fact, the only organ system under our voluntary control, which was a metabolic choice, is muscle. And that is at the root of many of these diseases. And that's where it was born.
That's great. I can really see how, that decision or kind of forced decision to study geriatrics can lead to that mindset. It's super cool.
Yeah, it was very difficult. It was probably the most difficult aspect. There was two really difficult aspects to medical training, but that was hands down, that took the longest to recover from. Just because you're not prepared. When we're young, we're thinking about performance and we're thinking about, well, it's just someday. It's never going to happen to us. And then when you look at the landscape of nutrition and fitness advice, it's not geared towards older individuals.
No, and that's a tough thing to see. Some of us have had family members or loved ones at end of life, and seeing that is hard, and you really recognize the ability to stay strong, age well, can really aid in the end of life phase of anybody. And most people haven't set themselves up for success to have an end of life that isn't sad.
And it doesn't. I don't believe. I can't say for sure for everybody, but I think that our culture for the last 50 years has been focused on obesity and what we have to lose and how we need to restrict, and that's very disempowering. And it sends the wrong message to our kids, and it sends the wrong message to us. And then as humans, we're really good at this cognitive bias. We're really good at perpetuating stories because we hear it, we believe it. And then, if we hear red meat is bad for cholesterol, then you go to your doctor, and your doctor goes, listen, your cholesterol's too high, you can't have red meat. Yeah. Regardless if that was based on a hypothesis or a belief system, we end up repeating it. Or women shouldn't go to the gym because they're going to get bulky. And so we tell these stories over and over again. Whether they're true or not, they become truthful because we talk about it so much. And there is always a level of opportunity to improve, no matter what. But I think that when you're young, there's a lot of flexibility, and the window of opportunity is wide open. But then when you're in your 60s and 70s, that window is always there, but perhaps you have to gain the knowledge much faster, and you have to be right at executing.
Yeah, and I think now we know more than ever that even if you start at 60 or 70, there's still incredible opportunities in those decades. So Gabrielle, passion and purpose is one of our core values at Impact Kitchen, and there's few people I've met or watched that ooze more passion than you do. Is there a story from your childhood that speaks to this passion that I'm seeing right now across the table?
Yeah, I can think of one. And I would say that I appreciate that. I am very passionate, and I am very driven by purpose. And I will say I think that that's why I've been successful. Someone asked me, and you were there last night, and somebody asked me what was my favorite moment of the whole night. It's so easy for me to tell you what that is. It's probably not going to be something that you can guess. And just to frame it for the listener, last night was phenomenal. We had great food. Thank you for that. We had a great environment. We had extraordinary people there. You realize the people in that room, they were extraordinary.
Yeah, it was really cool.
It was extraordinary.
Yeah.
My favorite, I'm going to give you one guess. Do you have any idea what that moment would be?
To me, I would have said just the overall energy of the evening and the people that were there. But I'm excited to hear what you're going to say.
You might not guess this. And again, I spent a long time thinking about it because somebody asked me. And the answer was so fast to me. There was, as I was up there talking, I was in conversation with one of my best friends, Don Saladino. When I was able to give an answer, I don't know if you noticed this, but I spoke about various people in the room. Did you notice that? That's unusual to break that.
No, it was actually a good move. I liked it that you did that.
It allows to break that fourth wall, or maybe it's called the third wall. I don't really know. But there was one person in that room she's actually my co-author. She's my partner in my books, and her name is Jessica Dulong. She's had more challenge this year than any human I know, and challenge that would have broken me, hands down. And I consider myself, we are a Navy family, we are a veteran family, I consider myself a pretty tough lady. It would have broken me. And as a co-author, it's not a forward-facing, it's really, at least in this dynamic with my books and our relationship, she's not in the forefront. And this is, by design, she's a journalist. She's an award-winning journalist. In her own domain, she's very, very forward-facing. And, she works on many projects. And most of the authors, they don't say her name or they don't recognize her because they think it takes away from them. And I was so proud to fully embarrass her and call her out.
She was sitting right in front of me.
Totally red in the face, completely appalled.
Yeah.
And it just was the best part for me, because I care so much about her, that that was hands down the best part of the night for me.
That's really cool. And we spoke off camera about surrounding yourself with amazing people. And actually, interesting you bring her up because she was sitting right in front of me. I could tell how proud she was of you when you were up there, because when you were speaking, she was nodding her head. She was laughing at like a little thing you said that's probably like a joke between you guys.
I'm glad that two people in that room found me funny, because my mom was there and she definitely thinks I'm funny. So
okay, yeah, that was cool. That's a nice insight.
Yeah, and as you talk about purpose and passion, again, I think one of the reasons that I've been so successful is really twofold. I've had very good training. I am not people say, well, how did you get to where you are? How did you write a New York Times bestseller as an unknown author? And how did you write this playbook? And I spent years doing the reps, did 2 years of psychiatry, 3 years of family medicine, medical school, plus a fellowship. This is not a pastime for me. It's an obsession. Mm-hmm. And so I think being really good at your craft and being very diligent and putting in the reps creates sustainability and depth of character and depth of knowledge. So I think you have to be really good at what you do. The other reason that I think that listen, people might disagree. Maybe I'm not that successful, but from my perspective, I think I've contributed and continued to contribute. But the reason I think that I've been able to contribute in the way that I have is because it's not about me. It's not about me. The purpose, the passion, it's not self-directed. And last night, people were like, oh my God, aren't you so exhausted? And I guess if I was focused on me and, well, this is about me, then maybe I would have been, but I wasn't. And so I think that, as we think about the health and wellness landscape, it has to be a community effort. And that's what actually moves the needle. And it's not about any one individual. It's not about any one perfect program or any one perfect meal. It's about the collective. Yeah. And forever, the collective has been, focused on weakness and let me make things more comfortable and whatever it is. There's, I think, two types of winners. It sounds ridiculous, but again, this is something I was thinking about this morning, probably because I had 2.5 hours sleep. But there's one type of winner that the only way they win is if someone else loses. Mm-hmm. And I guess that makes sense. But I also think the other type of winner wins when other people win too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great segue, thinking contribution. Okay, so I recently saw a photo of you on a stage holding a picture of a steak saying, eat real food. And many people, if not everybody, knows recently about the food pyramid changing, essentially getting flipped upside down. I know yourself and your mentor, Dr. Lehman, had incredible influence, and the talking about the reps you put in for 20 years and him longer than that. Can you tell me a little bit about what this has meant to you, and maybe how some of those conversations behind the scenes have gone to get to this change?
Yeah. So you have 2 kids. Mm-hmm. And I imagine that the birth of your children was a moment where you were like, holy cow. And probably, the first, like the second one, we love you guys, but, we're kind of your old hat. But all joking aside, there's that moment where time slows down. And again, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm assuming that was probably one of those moments. I'm sure you have had other of those moments, but in my own life, I've probably only had 2. I mean 3. I guess I have 2 kids. So, and then I got married. So let's say there's 4 moments.
Okay.
Sorry, honey. And I was on stage with 15 other people, carefully selected, to be on stage as the administration addressed the country. And it was like a moment that I never thought was going to happen. And this is like 25 years of work. And it makes me emotional. I don't think people have ever really seen me get too emotional. But it was just fascinating yesterday. I do these events and I'm out there because I think it's important to connect. And as I'm walking, I think I was walking from the event that I just finished. I don't remember exactly when it happened because it was very fleeting. But someone at the gym came up to me and they said, Gabrielle, as a longtime fan of yours, thank you so much for everything you do. And I'm so disappointed in you. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Why? And she was like, because of your support of the administration. And I thought to myself, you must be an idiot.
Yeah.
Because we've been working on these changes through multiple administrations, multiple sacrifices. This is a moment for Americans, and I suppose Canadians too.
Yeah, I think it's for both.
But a moment that I never thought was going to happen. That changing these guidelines, it's so personal to me, to many people, but I can say for me, this has been, you were talking about sacrifice, and you were talking about time, and you were talking about criticisms, and all of these things. And the reason it's so meaningful is because these old guidelines were based on, low quality evidence. And it was doing nothing for people but making them fatter and more unhealthy and more focused on processed foods, not the kind of foods that you guys serve at Impact, on foods that actually take away from health and contribute to the problem. And what becomes so critical is this narrative that then gets pushed forward in this idea that, beyond that these guidelines, they inform schools.
Well, I was going to ask you, this is a big deal. Now,
It's a big deal it's
how do you think about some of the kind of a medium wins effects of this change? You mentioned schools. I can think of a lot of short-term
Military.
effects, but also, the country, Canada, U.S. I think we need to think about it in terms of generations to come. The food pyramid is a factor in how those generations are going to think about food. So the impact of it is, I think, even bigger than you probably can fathom it. But it's a big move in the right direction.
It is, in my opinion, the most important move that we have seen in health in decades. Yeah. Mm-hmm. There has never been a focus on real whole foods. And what is the one unifying factor that every alive human has? They have to eat.
Yeah.
Arguably, you also have to breathe, but you have to eat.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like a non-negotiable.
Yeah.
And so what these guidelines represent is an orientation to good quality evidence and also prioritizing things that we have to gain, like muscle health, prioritizing health. Also, it provides a tool for teaching our kids, for informing our military, for informing our hospitals, for informing anyone that receives any type of federal funding. They have to comply with these guidelines. It also informs the drive for food. So you better believe that people are going to be looking to you and your industry, the consumer-facing food industry, to provide nourishment and also be able to say, okay, well, these are the guidelines. So this playbook, believe it or not, I'm telling you, I don't know how it worked out this way, but it did. The nutrition portion of this book, so there's 4 pillars in this book. It's how to think, how to eat, how to move, and how to recover. The new guidelines, 90% of the new guidelines are represented in this book and how to implement them.
Yeah, I love it. And it's true. But that's, I think, partly the work that you and Don Lehman have done to get this into the mainstream. I can only believe that it's helped move this forward.
Well, he wrote the protein guidelines for
That's pretty cool.
Our country.
Yeah, that's amazing.
He wrote it.
Well, that's so cool. So I have a question for you regarding protein specifically, but overall, I'm curious at the conversation around the quality of our food. We know that corn, wheat, and soy are government subsidies to support those industries. Regenerative farming is something that I've become more passionate in. The braised beef we had last night at your event was from
which I ordered today, so I hope you guys brought some.
Yeah,
for
we
me.
absolutely did, and it's from a regenerative farm here in the U.S.
Amazing.
Is there a conversation going on behind the scenes related to the food pyramid of how we're going to shift the entire food system, not just the food pyramid? Because I think when we talk about the quality of food, that needs to change, over time as well.
What you're talking about, and for the listener, let's frame this up. The first step is to bring awareness to the foods that we're eating and how to eat to optimize health, which I believe we are 90% there with this new upside-down food pyramid. The question that you are talking about is a very wise question. And I think in the next 6 months to a year, we're going to start to see an increasing conversation about how do we feed a world? How do we feed a nation? Now, it's challenging, and food production is a challenging system. But what is going to need to happen is that we're going to, and again, I don't have all the answers here, but we're going to have good farming practices, and we're going to have to really support our farmers to be able to produce the quality that we need. And I think that it's going to be very important going forward. And mark my words, that's going to be the next controversy.
Yeah.
It is going to be the next controversy.
No, I see it coming because, you meet these regenerative farmers, you speak to them, and then you start learning about the issues they have kind of fighting big farming. And there's going to need to be a dramatic shift if we are able to offer, high quality regenerative farm proteins, vegetables. But I believe it is the next big thing in food, and needs to be get a spotlight shone on it. And I think people like you are going to be talking about it more and more as we shift to a protein-forward diet.
And I will say that in the U.S., there is a lot of good farming practices. And where I see this going is going to be in two directions. One direction, the people that are anti-animal are going to start talking about greenhouse gas, and they're going to start talking about all of this stuff that actually is largely inaccurate. For example, this idea of a meatless Monday. Remember that whole thing? It was, we're going to have a meatless Monday, and the reality is that going to actually impact greenhouse gas? I mean, greenhouse gas isn't just one thing. There's this whole carbon cycle. It's not like that. And let's say someone went vegan for 2 years. You take one transatlantic flight, and it's like neutral. And not to mention the impacts on one's health. And so the idea that we're going to be able to eat our way out of these environmental issues is just not true. The reality is, when we think about in the U.S. Specifically, the majority of, say, greenhouse gas and the things that are affecting the environment come from electricity, industry, transportation. Maybe 9% comes from agriculture collectively.
Yeah.
Half of that would be animal agriculture, and the rest is, fruits and vegetables and all this waste. And so that is one direction that I see. So people should be very aware who are listening to this and going, I want to eat high-quality foods, and I want to eat high-quality proteins. These are also likely very conscious individuals that they might start hearing a narrative to kind of push them away from that. So beware, because it's coming. Mm-hmm. And then the second half of this is, how do we reduce food waste? We don't throw away meats. You throw away, rotting fruits and vegetables. The majority of food waste is the other stuff, the perishable stuff. Yeah. And so the process for how we waste less, how we become very skilled at the agricultural needs, I think is the second half of that conversation.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. They say we produce 5 times more food than we need. And, you look at the waste from grocery stores, from my industry, the restaurant industry, it's pretty astronomical.
And you see it firsthand on actually a large scale. That's
it's evident. And so I think we hear the term upcycling now is becoming more mainstream. I think that's important. I think just the word regenerative farming, regenerating the land. I think that's going to become more mainstream, and more farmers I know are starting to enter into that space as they learn more about it. There's a group in Canada called the New Farm that we partner with, and their whole mission now is educating other farms. So they're a nonprofit now, and they bring in conventional farmers to transition them into regenerative. And it's fun to hear them talk about how that is now changing. Southern Ontario where we live, and the regenerative farming movement is booming there. And I know in the U.S. there's the Rodale Institute, the Savory Institute, and they're doing the same thing, which is great to see. Step in the right direction.
It's extraordinary, and I want to mention one more thing. As we start thinking about what we're going to be up against, when we have awareness of the challenges that we're fighting, then we can attune ourselves to them. And here's what I mean by that. And this is just to piggyback really briefly off of what you're talking about for farmers, is that really there's two sectors. There's the processed food, and then there's the whole food commodity. Whole food commodity would be something like the beef checkoff, or the dairy industry, or egg, or soy, or corn, or almonds. They're whole foods. These are governed under USDA. And then there's the processed foods, which is governed under a different entity. Processed foods have their own regulations. So for example, PepsiCo, or name another massive juggernaut, their marketing budget is like $2 billion. The small farms collectively, for all of the industries, all the commodities, which would be beef and, like I said, dairy, collectively their marketing budget is $750 million. Collectively, all the industry.
Yeah.
And when we think about that, we see what we're up against. I mean, that's not even a fraction of what one of these companies. So to be able to take an ad out on the Super Bowl, to be able to reach millions and millions and millions of people, they can afford to get, say, celebrities or whoever else it is.
Yeah.
And one more thing that I'll say is that fake meat, for example, could say, this is a better source of protein, and it's better for the environment, and it can make all of these claims. But a commodity can say, I don't know, beef, what's for dinner? Or milk, does a body good? It can't actually make claims to defend itself. And therefore, the fight is not equal, and the information is not equal. And it's just something to be aware of as we enter into this new landscape.
Well, and I think some of these monumental changes, like the flipping of the food pyramid, they'll need to come in the years to come to shift that focus to the general population, the masses. Like we know everyone that attended last night, that would make complete sense to them. And
that's right.
It's tougher when you open the conversation up to the entire nation, all of America, all of Canada, all the world.
Well, that's what I think that we are doing, you and me collectively in our respective entities. So the Forever Strong playbook that's who I wrote this for. The Forever Strong playbook isn't, written for the Olympian, although it would serve the Olympian, but it's written for anybody and anyone who's interested in good science. And it's the book that I wanted to write.
Yeah.
It's not just, like flipping the pages of a normal textbook. It's designed in a way that is both appealing to the eye and organized in a way that it gives you how to take action on the scientific information. It teaches you how to implement the new food guide. It teaches you recipes, which, by the way, I'm curious to what you think about my recipes.
I'm going to get there because I read them all. I there's some impact inspo on those. And I also picked out some that I'm going to make with my kids.
Okay, amazing. We should share recipes because, my favorite, and I don't want to get too sidetracked, but my favorite is the egg sandwich.
Okay.
I mean, I'm obsessed with it. And I bet you, if I was more creative, I could make it better. Just saying.
Well, it looked great. I think there you had a frittata that I already circled.
Amazing.
And then your waffles. I know my son is going to want to make those.
I mean, they're amazing. And then
we'll be testing those in my kitchen at home probably this week.
All right.
I'll take a photo and send it to you.
I cannot wait. And I will say one more. There's this like an egg in a hole spaghetti squash. Nice. It's amazing.
Nice.
It's amazing.
Nice.
Doesn't have to be complicated. I'm a terrible cook. So if I can do it, you can do it.
Well, shifting gears to how we think, I wanted to start off with a bit of a framework of understanding how you think about balance and time. And I know for myself, I mentioned I opened Impact 10 years ago. We had 2 kids under 2, and I was working 100 plus hours a week. And so at that point, there was no balance in my life. And actually what kind of kickstarted a shift in mindset for me was I hired a coach to teach me how to run a restaurant. And he quickly realized that I didn't know how to run my life. And so he asked me the simple question, what's important to me? And I said, my family, my health and wellness, and my business. He's like, okay, let's have you write down what you do in your calendar every day for the week, and then we'll analyze that. So, I do that. He's like, okay, where did you spend time with your kids? Where did you work out? And I'd always be like, I couldn't. And he's like, why? Because XYZ happened at the restaurant. So this went on for weeks. And then one day he said to me, he's like, okay, Josh, I want you to write your eulogy from your kid's perspective. And even saying that today, it's still a gut punch. But it was what I needed, because then I started to think, okay, I need to change how I'm approaching the business, because that is not allowing me to spend time with my kids and my wellness. So, I started to think about it in a different way. And to this day, I still think about my calendar, week, month, quarter of family and kid time, health and wellness time, and then business time. And that's, I think, changed my life for the better. And you being, a best-selling author, entrepreneur, wife, mom, practicing doctor, how do you think about balance in your life?
Balance is an interesting concept, and I don't really think about balance. I think about standards.
Okay.
And there is a eulogy mortality reflection in the book. So what you did, without knowing, your coach is very smart, is that you really thought about your why any of this stuff matters. And the weaker the why, the more superficial the why, people say, well, I want to take care of myself because I want to be around for my kids. That took no time and effort. That took no emotion. And that's a weak why. Even if your kids are important, it has to be so granular. For example, what is it that my kids are going to say when I'm dead?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that takes time and effort to reflect on. And because the emotion is so powerful and because there's so much depth to that, it'll allow you, when motivation fails, because motivation for me fails every day, right? Like, I'm exhausted. I have 5 million things to do, but I know the why that I'm willing to execute. So when things get hard, because I know they're going to get hard, I don't have to think about, well, why am I doing this? I know exactly why I'm making the choices that I'm making. And that's, I just want to point that out, because what you said had a lot of gravity to it, and people have to recognize that the more superficial, the less protected you are. The deeper and more connected you are to that why, and really finding that is critical. It's like finding your North Star. So I know what that is. And I encourage everybody to go through that practice. Again, I don't really think much of balance. I think that there are seasons. There are seasons to life. And you have to recognize, how long is the season going to last? When you're building a business that you're working 100 hours, that's a season. My husband, who was in the Navy his first career, who is now in his second career, he's a surgical resident. He's working 100 hours a week. He literally, I'm talking to him and I look over and the guy's asleep. And I guarantee you that he would much rather be hanging out with us than working. But he has certain requirements and certain things that are expected of him. And so there's nothing I can do about that season. So we all go through those seasons. The other aspect of designing a life is really important. I would argue that I don't have balance, but I do have standards. So for me, exactly what you said, I'm a mom. I run multiple businesses. I'm an author. I'm a speaker. I'm doing a lot of things that I think are really important. I also do not, this is going to blow your mind. Are you ready for this? Josh,
I'm ready.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I don't have full-time baby care. Is your mind blown?
Yeah.
It's kind of blown,
Yeah.
right? Okay. So 50% of the time, I do the morning. So I either do a morning or an evening, meaning I train 3 days a week in the morning. That's not a lot of time. That's 45 minutes in the morning. So Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, someone helps with the kids, get them ready. And listen, they're allowed to come and train with me if they want, but they have to get to school on time. So it doesn't usually work out that way. And then the other evenings, I pick up the kids. And that is a lot of time, but it is very intentional time.
Mm-hmm.
There's no phone, there's no, unless it's in a book launch season, right, in a handful of discrete timeframes, there are ways in which I've designed my calendar. I don't expect balance, but I do know what I value, and the actions are in alignment with what I value most. And so the other aspect of that is most people focus on what they're good at. Okay, well, this is what I'm good at. I'm good at cooking, so I'm going to cook, or I'm good at X, Y, and Z. What they don't focus on is what they're weak at and where they fail. And so what I do is I figure out where those are. So, for example, I'm a terrible cook. Believe it or not, I'm a terrible cook. But my kids love to do dinner, and they love to do breakfast. We do waffles. So what we do is we figure out, when am I cooking versus when am I getting help when someone else is helping me cook? And so all of the things, I'm terrible at folding laundry, I'm terrible at doing a lot of things. I focus on what I'm really good at, and then I know where I fall short, and then I actually don't try to spend time on doing the things that I fall short. And this is purely from a business aspect. And that allows me to work very much in kind of that critical mass of what I'm good at. And so while there are sacrifices, for example, we do bedtime together. And sometimes it's really inconvenient. And then at 8 p.m. when the kids go to bed, I get back to work till 10 or sometimes midnight. Not really convenient, and it stings a little bit, but it still is in alignment with the values that I set.
That's amazing. A lot of similarities in the lifestyle, and I think designing your life is the key term there. I love that. And yeah, it's a constant evolution too on that design.
And the other thing that I will say for entrepreneurs, because I know that there's all kinds of people that listen to this podcast, that there's various levels of where any business is. So let's say the entrepreneurial journey. A rookie entrepreneur, and so I still am in medical practice, and I take care of military, and I take care of CEOs, and I take care of moms. And I will tell you that there are similarities between those that do the best. Surprising similarities. And one of the most remarkable characteristics that I have found is that those at the top of their game and those that are able to continue to perform, you're like, how are they doing this? How are they performing day after day with, not having these ebbs and flows? And one of their primary attributes or characteristics that they have and also can be cultivated is they are neutral. There is a level of neutrality that these people bring to the table that allow them to be almost like inoculated against stress. And I can explain more as to what that is, but it's an unusual characteristic.
Yeah, like I would agree completely. It's about not getting flustered in the moment, because as you know, there's a lot of things being thrown at entrepreneurs, moms, dads, a lot of responsibilities, and I think that neutrality is something that is a common factor in people I'm thinking about right now who I'm blown away by. It's a great point.
And let's for the listener, let's play out. Let's just for fun play it out for someone. Someone's like, okay, well, what is neutral? You sound really boring. I don't even want to hang out with you now. I mean, you're like, no one wants to hang out with you. You're like the most unpopular person at the party. So neutrality is this way of, well, let's talk about what happens when you go too high and too low. When you're very excitable and you're like, oh my God, we're going to open up Impact. Oh my gosh. Okay, we're going to have our grand opening. Do you remember your grand opening?
Yeah.
Were you stressed out of your mind?
You know what? I don't think I was.
Okay, well then we have to come up with something else. I'm sure there was a moment where, what about your first big talk?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm probably downplaying. I was definitely stressed, but I also surround myself with great people, so that helps.
So they're like, chill out. But okay. So imagine, okay, I'll give you an example. Your first talk, what has made you nervous in the past? Is there anything?
Yeah, like being in front of groups of people definitely is nerve-wracking for me still.
And do you remember the first time you did that? Like just
yeah,
or maybe the first time you messed up, or just
absolutely.
Oh my God. So as you're preparing for this talk, right? You're probably like awake. It's midnight, and all these thoughts you're like amping yourself up. And, oh my God, this, that. Maybe you don't process like that, but maybe you're cognitively you're not processing, but you're feeling it. You're getting like
sure.
You're like getting really amped up.
Yeah.
The higher you go, the higher you allow yourself to go, the lower that you fall. as amped up as you get, now these are points of vulnerability because I think this is important for whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a mom, whatever it is that you do, you need to learn this because it will make you more resilient. The higher that you go, so right before you get on stage to give that talk, your heart is racing, your armpits are sweating, you're just a mess. You've amped yourself up for weeks, you give that talk, how do you feel after?
Relieved, tired, but feel great. But yeah, you're exhausted.
You're exhausted.
Yeah.
Exhausted, right? You're like, oh my God, I just feel like I ran 50 miles and I just don't talk to me. I don't want to work out. And then maybe what crept in there, you felt amazing right after, but perhaps the next day you felt kind of depressed.
Yeah, there's a letdown phase for sure.
There's a letdown phase. Interestingly, that's predictable. And the higher that you allowed yourself to get in that moment, at that peak is a point of vulnerability. And what one has to recognize is at that peak, as high as you are, as amped, as hard as your heart is racing, is as low as you will fall. That letdown, you are, again, most vulnerable to your weaknesses. And they could be, this might not be for you, but it is for me, shopping, or the next car, or for people, whatever, that like to date, the next girlfriend or the next trip or the next thing, and you're looking to kind of drive that dopamine and that drive and motivation back up. Both points you are at your ultimate, you're vulnerable points. Why this becomes so important is because you make bad choices. Maybe you didn't work out that day. Maybe you took the week off. Maybe you took the month off, and it took you a long time to recover, let's just say. All of the while, you could have been moving the needle forward. You could have been more steady. We never make good choices under duress. We never make good choices when they're highly emotional. They're not. So the rookie entrepreneur, and sometimes the rookie has nothing to do with the length of time someone practices. The length of time. Imagine if you never got better at speaking. If you had that same response every single time.
Mm-hmm.
How exhausting.
It wouldn't be fun. I'd probably stop.
And how many because you are now what I would consider a seasoned entrepreneur. You're very steady, kind of go with the flow, okay, everything is erupting, I got this. You're steady, right? You detach and move forward. But the rookie, and I use this term loosely, is constantly at the mercy of these ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
Why does that matter? It takes you out of your health and wellness goals. It takes you off of your standards. It takes you out of the game mentally. And it is completely and utterly avoidable. Mm-hmm. So the first pillar of the book is how to think. I can say, Josh, we are going to make the perfect meal. And I'm going to provide that for you, and it's going to be amazing. And someone goes, okay, cool. And then I can go, Josh, I'm going to give you the perfect workout program. In front of you is the perfect manual for the body of your dreams. Okay? And you're like, this is awesome. And then, I don't know, you get tired, you get flustered, something happens. You never had a framework for how to close the gap between being interested and actually being committed to taking action. And if we are going to create a nutrition plan, which I do in the book, if we're going to create a training plan, which I have in the book, and recovery protocols, that wouldn't be complete if we don't have the infrastructure for how to think and operate and a training plan for our mind. And so that first pillar is how to think, because that is the most important pillar to get right.
Well, it's interesting. I'm thinking about the word consistency as well here. So you have the playbook right here, right? And you're right. You have the nutrition plan, the recovery plan, the movement plan. How would you coach somebody who, maybe hasn't done the work that you just talked about, and they lose motivation, they lose consistency? Do you have in the book coaching cues, tips? Because we all aren't dialed in all the time. How does someone get back on track, specifically to say an exercise program when they've lost a week, or they take 2 weeks off, or worse?
There are. This is a playbook, and it's a tactical field manual, and there's options. It's kind of like choose your own adventure. In that first chapter, which is quite frankly my favorite chapter, that and the how to eat, if I was being fully transparent. Now, that chapter has multiple tools. The tool that is going to work for me is going to be different than the tool that's going to work for you. And I think like I said, you figure out your why. You also figure out who you are, your weaknesses. You also figure out there's a pyramid in the book, and it's a practice in discernment, meaning just because you think the thought or just because you have these ideas doesn't make them relevant at all. Yeah, I mean, the brain is a thought-producing machine. Just because it's your brain and they're your thoughts, it doesn't make them any more relevant. And again, there's tools, and there's tools there to assess your own narrative, which I think is very valuable. And then the final piece to that, and again, there's multiple tools, but the one that I find most effective for people is this idea of friction. It's not how do we reduce stress. I mean, like, this is the conversation. Take a warm bubble bath, let me rub your feet. I mean, listen, if my husband's like, hey, I'm going to come rub your feet, I'm like, okay. And then after 2 minutes, I'm like, you're the worst foot rubber ever. Get out of here. But all this to say is that we try to navigate our environment by creating more comfort, as opposed to creating more discomfort. And I am not talking about the big things. I'm not talking about getting up in front of thousands of people. I am not talking about buying a new business. I am talking about flip a coin. Heads, you get to go into that Starbucks and get that coffee, and tails, you don't. That's a little bit of annoying. I love to listen to loud music and drink enough caffeine to kill a draft horse. Heads, I flip a coin. Heads, I get that caffeine and loud music, and tails, I don't. I don't know about you, but there are multiple, and I cover this in the book, there are multiple ways to add in little opportunities of friction that are utterly and completely annoying. You can add in emotional friction. You can add in physical friction. You could add in environmental friction. All the while, the more friction that you add in on a small scale. So imagine the 5th time you go to Starbucks, you flip a coin, and for gosh sakes, you don't get that coffee again. For like number 5, you're like, all right, cool, dude. What's next? And you become inoculated just a little bit over time. And again, it could be having the conversation that you don't want to have. I mean, that's uncomfortable, you know? There's like levels to the amount of friction, but becoming very comfortable tolerating low levels of friction builds that muscle. You know, you don't go and do a 1-rep max that's worthwhile without practicing it. You do, okay, so you're going to do like 5 repetitions, 6 repetitions, 8 repetitions. You know, you got to like learn how to move, and you build up to it. And then when the storm hits, because the storm always hits.
It will hit, yeah.
It's not if, it's a when.
Yeah.
That you become so surprised that you're way more prepared for it. So I'll just bring this back to me. Last night people were like, oh my gosh, you must be so exhausted. And then you've got like the introverts like, oh my gosh, you must be so exhausted. And then you have the extroverts that are like, oh my gosh, you must be so, my husband's like, oh my gosh, you must be so energized. And exhausted or energized, actually, I felt pretty neutral. I was so happy to see the people that I care about yesterday and meet new friends. But, you know, I get all these text messages like, how do you feel? Well, I mean, chop wood, carry water. And that was probably the biggest lesson in the how to think. So this is a great person for your podcast. Do you know Ben Newman?
I don't.
He would be a great person for your podcast. Okay. I'm just going to share one last story, and then I probably bored everyone with these stories, and I apologize, but you are now a captive audience. So I'm just going to roll with this story. My first book, Forever Strong, was a New York Times bestseller. I had recently had a baby. 10 months later, I was pregnant. My husband just came out of the SEAL teams, now in medical school. So I have a grown man baby, okay? And I had hyperemesis gravidum. I was very sick, like terrible pregnancy. And writing the book was really hard. And then 8 weeks after I, released this book into this world, I'm getting called to go on TV and it's all this stuff, right? So I'm sorry. The book comes out 8 weeks later, maybe it was 6 weeks. I'm getting these calls, and I just had a baby. I just had my second baby. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so stressed. I just, it's like new territory. And so And then I'm like required to give these talks. Not required, but it's something that I think is an important skill. And it's a perishable skill, and I should be doing it. And if you have the capacity, you have the responsibility to do it. And so I called Ben Newman, who is a friend, and I was his doctor for a long time, and just someone I deeply respect. I'm like, oh my gosh, Ben. And it's really loud, shh, in the background, shh. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm getting on this other jet. I got to go, to this football game because they're doing the national championships and like all this stuff. And I'm like, Ben, I don't know how to do it. How am I going to, the book is coming out, like the book is coming out or it just come out and I have to do this. I'm telling him all these things. And it's dead silent on the other line. I'm like, hello, Ben? He's like, Doc. I'm like, yeah, dude, what? It's just another Tuesday. He's like, when are you going to stop telling yourself that it's something else? This is what you do, and it's just another Tuesday.
Great advice.
I was like, brother, mic drop it. And he was right.
Yeah.
It's just another Tuesday. And
That's
ever
great. Since
since that moment, he inspired a lot of the first portion of that book, How to Think, because ever since then, I'm not recreating myself when I go and speak. Yesterday I spoke in a room of, 100 amazing humans. Do you think I was amped before I got up to address these people?
Well, I think you were probably pretty neutral.
It was just another Tuesday.
Yeah.
But my dress was awesome.
It was great as an audience member.
But it was.
It makes a ton of sense.
And that can be practiced.
Yeah, I agree. And you have amazing I like that in your playbook, you put a lot of questions to the person to answer to get them thinking about that. So it makes a ton of sense. Okay, shifting to my favorite section of the book, How to Eat.
That better be your favorite section.
I think it's the most confusing subject for a lot of people, and it's an evolving conversation. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your journey and your nutrition philosophies, because I think it would be a relief to people to hear that your way of eating and your thought around eating has changed a lot over the last 20 years. And you've spoken about being vegan and obviously now shifted to more animal-focused, protein-focused approach. Can you talk a little bit about that journey and some of the learnings along the way?
Gladly. Typically, when people become an expert in their field, many times it's because they're interested, and then sometimes they're just totally obsessed. And for me, food was an absolute obsession. I graduated high school early, and I moved in with my godmother. And my godmother just happened to be a woman named Liz Lipsky, and she's a PhD in nutritional sciences. Now, functional medicine is like the big thing. This was before functional medicine had a name. She was like the OG. There was, like 4 of these people. The OG in functional medicine. I moved in with her. I moved to Hawaii. And the deal was I was a terrible employee. I was working for room and board. Like, this is my godmother. It was terrible. But what I learned working for room and board is I watched her interview people. And she was taking care of patients with cancer. She was taking care of patients with eating disorders. She was taking care of all these different people. And you know what? I never heard of this concept. She was using food as medicine. It blew my mind. I thought medicine was just Benadryl and Advil. But this idea, and she would have all these herbal books. She's a little on the woo side. Sorry, Aunt Liz, but she was. It didn't matter. It was so inspiring that I knew that this was what I was going to do. I just knew it. So when I left being there, I had already committed to studying human nutrition and vitamin mineral metabolism in college. I eventually found my way to Dr. Donald Lehman's class. And by the way, I was a very good student. I don't know if that surprises you. But I was. Really,
It doesn't surprise me.
And I was sitting in the front row.
Yeah,
my
I can see
protein
that.
shake.
Yeah.
I just, I was very disciplined. I had my, gym bag. And funny, I have a counterpart that's also in the public eye quite a bit. And I don't know if you know this person, Dr. Lane Norton.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, of course.
hey, Lane. He's like my brother. Lane sat in the back of the class.
Okay.
I was a way better student than Lane, but we were he was in his graduate program when I was finishing my undergraduate.
I'm sure there's a friendly rivalry there.
Yeah, because I like to win. Anyway, Lane is like my brother, and we've known each other for 20 years now.
That's cool.
So I recognized very early on, I think that my superpower is recognizing people. I think I'm very good at recognizing really good talent. And I don't know another way, because that's not talent. I think it's maybe innovation, maybe just recognizing the special characteristics in people. And I heard Don speak. So for everyone else, he's like, the nutty professor or whatever. He never listens to my podcast. It doesn't really matter. So please, you guys, don't send this to him. But the way in which he explained things was 10 years ahead of what we could read in textbooks. And so there is an element of creativity and science, which then ultimately leads to innovation. And I saw that. I felt it. I heard it. And I recognized that this person, whether he liked it or not, was going to teach me for a lifetime. So every office, you better believe I was there for every office hours. I probably went to one football game, and I went to the University of Illinois my entire college career, maybe two. Because you know what I was doing? I was collecting urine samples in a lab, doing some of the first studies on higher protein diet and women and calorie control and the food guide pyramid. And so, this was the story of like, how did you know? What was your journey? How did you come up with this? Well, at the time, I was, because I had just come from the woo area where, Liz was talking about the chakras and the colors of the food and whatever she was talking, they were energetics, which was super cool. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to be vegan. This is the energetic path for me. And so I did that. And I really loved animals, and I felt really bad in doing all this stuff. And because I was so obsessed with health, I was going to get it right. And I was reading about macrobiotics and with the seasons and the moon cycles. Like, it was the whole thing. I don't even know how I had time to be a good student. I was really into this. And I was also training. Physical activity has always been a part of my life. And my teeth started getting loose, and my hair started falling out, and I was starving, and I just couldn't keep it together. And I remember when I was like, this is just not working. I was doing the best I could with the knowledge I had. And I remember the first time I was like, okay, well, I think I really need to increase my protein. And this is not to say that someone cannot be vegan and healthy. You can, but it takes a level of skill I didn't have. I was worrying about other things. I couldn't think about the supplements and the food combination. I couldn't. And I cried when I ate chicken. I mean, that's kind of embarrassing to say, but I will never forget the first time I was like, okay, I'm going to explore a different way. And I felt so much better. And I was like, okay, so there's something to this. And then again, I transitioned to like boiled chicken and broccoli and a bodybuilding diet and, good macronutrients and no nutrient density. And so it was this evolution. And here's the thing with age. I look pretty good for 25. But anyway, here's the thing with age, is that you hope that you accrue some wisdom. Mm-hmm. And what I've come to realize is that there's no one way to do it, and that human beings are incredibly flexible, and their nutrition needs and their nutrition plans can be flexible. There's a million different ways to do it. But there are some good fundamental principles that if one understands, then they're able to pick and choose how they design a diet. And so I went from being extreme on one end to extreme on the other, to then, 10 years of work and research and writing and seeing patients and, come to a place that now is a playbook in your hands. And again, with good foundational principles, you get to choose.
Yeah, well said. Another inspiration from you over the years is the blue zones. And, I'm guessing yourself and Dan Buettner would agree on most things. But his recommendations for protein are very different than yours. How do you look at the blue zones and how do you, if someone asks you that question, the type of protein he recommends to the type of protein you recommend? I know you kind of just answered that, but I'm curious because I get asked that question all the time. What's the perfect human diet? Is it plant-based? Is it more carnivore? And I'd love to kind of hear how you think about the blue zones.
This is a great question. And so the first thing that we have to do is we have to get very myopic and we have to define what are the blue zones and how many are there. And there are so many more blue zones than a handful of specially curated blue zones. And there are more to quote the blue zones than people think. So for example, some blue zones have the lowest level of education and the highest level of smoking. Well, we wouldn't say, well, that's a healthy environment. And again, so we have to really think about what is it in the location that we're really talking about and how good are those records? And is that just a highly curated pocket versus other blue zones where they eat more red meat and more dietary protein? And so, again, the question is, how do we define blue zones and what is the full spectrum of truth of many of those blue zones? Some with highest levels of smoking and lowest levels of education and highest levels of poverty. Like there's all of these other things, but you never hear about those areas, right?
Yeah.
Which is weird. So then I would say, okay, so let's say we use that idea. This is what we would call epidemiology, population-based observations. And so we would say, okay, so based on observations and epidemiology, we form a hypothesis. Based on the hypothesis, we then take that to randomized controlled trials. Again, this is just basic, good scientific investigation. And so here's what we know. We know that when you look at randomized controlled trials, and let's say we look at dietary protein, we can agree that 0.8 grams per kg, which again, I think that the blue zones recommend the minimum of 0.37
I think it's about that.
And so if we were to look at 0.8 grams or 0.37 grams per kg, we go, okay, so let's look at these randomized controlled trials in various populations. When we give people a lower protein diet based on that number, and then when we give people a higher protein diet, say above 1 gram, per kg. So, 1.6 grams per kg. And what do we see? Here is what the randomized controlled trials and the evidence shows, is that those with a higher protein diet above 0.8 grams per kg, so above the minimum that we hear about on these lower protein diets, what are the health outcomes of those people that have double the RDA or 1.6 grams per kg? Here's what we find. They're able to maintain lean body mass. They're able to, with carbohydrates controlled, improve blood glucose, improve triglycerides, improve insulin, and most importantly, think about overall body composition. So, if we believe that muscle is the organ of longevity, what are our major risk factors of death? Well, we think about heart disease, we think about cancers, we think about the contribution of type 2 diabetes, and then we think about the contribution of obesity. So these are the health outcomes that we're up against. And then we say, okay, well, what is the focal point of that? Is it body fat percentage? Is it muscle mass? And someone could say, we don't care. But what we do care about is when we have randomized controlled trials where we increase the dietary protein and we see that those individuals on a higher protein diet have better bone density, have lower triglycerides, have lower insulin, have lower glucose, then we say, and maintain lean body mass, then I would say as a practicing physician, I would feel much safer recommending that. And by the way, they always do better. I've never seen a study, a good randomized controlled trial. Now, we're not talking about epidemiology, which is a low quality data. You cannot make health recommendations to populations based on hypotheses. Mm-hmm. We've already seen what happens when you do that. And you know what that was called? The food guide pyramid disaster.
Yeah, and we know the data there.
We already know what happened there.
Yeah.
And that's where I think we have to get very granular on what the science says, and then how do we interpret, say, quote, a blue zone? Do I think that physical activity is important? Yeah, great. 74% of Americans are either overweight or obese. So let's say we extrapolate what they say in the blue zones. These two, it's like, which is different? That's a hypothetical environment that we don't live in. So in real life, where we really live and what we're really doing, how do we make recommendations that are evidence-based and responsible for those people?
I love it.
So Dan, this is what I have to say to you. And by the way, I think you do great work. We have a really good friend in common. Maria Shriver is both a dear friend of ours. But I will say, Dan, let's be honest about the blue zones and transparent about these various areas. And so that would be my answer. And I would say that, in real life, and again, I see patients, and we don't live in blue zones. We just don't. And the majority of people are not exercising, and they're not resistance training.
Yeah.
They're not. And I had a woman, I went to give a talk in Denver at Newtopia. It's a very cool convention. And a 74-year-old woman came up to me. And she goes, I read the blue zones, and I read Die for a Small Planet, and I've lost bone mass. And I keep hearing I shouldn't eat red meat because it's going to increase my cholesterol, and I don't know what to do. Can you tell me what's right? And this is a frail 74-year-old who is reading this information and then making choices.
Yeah.
And I said to her, I was like, well, how many calories are you ingesting? And she's like, well, I might have between 700 and 1,000 calories. She's tiny. She's like smaller than me. And I'm 5'1". At least that's what I say. And she was maybe 4'11". And I go, well, like, how many calories? She's like, between 700 and 1,000. When I hit my 60s, like around 65, my appetite really decreased. So what is the repercussions of telling this woman to go more plant-based? You tell me the health outcomes. If that's your mom or your grandma, there is no way. And so what these people don't understand is that there are real implications for real-life people. And I think that that's why you and me and Albie, Brian Mazza, we're here at Lifetime, fight for those people, the people that are in the middle that no one's really thinking about.
I just saw the passion. I love it.
Don't even
and
get
I
me
respect
fired
it. You're
up.
fired
My
up. You're
armpits
fired
are
up.
sweaty.
So, I don't want to fire you up more. Let's get neutral here. So I do want to ask you about something else that I think you differ on from some of the other experts out there, and that's the conversation of fasting. In your book, you talk about breakfast being the most important meal of the day, and you recommend eating 1 to 2 hours from waking up. Why is that? We hear so much about 16-hour fast, 24-hour fast or more. This protein-forward, muscle-centric way of living. It sounds like that may not be the best approach. What do you recommend when it comes to fasting?
Okay. Fasting. We should define fasting. Are we talking about time-restricted feeding? Are we eating in an 8 to 9 hour window? Or are we going 24 hours, 50 hours? Are we going long periods of fasting? The first question we have to ask ourselves, again, I'm a practicing clinician, which makes it a little bit different in that when you make a choice to do something for your health in one direction or the other, what's the outcome in mind, right? Like I don't just do things because I think it's fun. I want to know, what are we going for? So if you say to me, Gabrielle, I want to fast because it's good for, let's pick a word out of the hat, autophagy. And I go, okay, so autophagy is the cleaning out of these old cells. What are the other ways that we can get there? If we know that the most important organ system under our voluntary control, the most important organ system is skeletal muscle. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Do you think that anyone at this point disagrees that muscle, I will say, is the organ of longevity? Do you think that people disagree that muscle is really not the focal point? I mean, maybe they do.
I don't know many people that could make an argument against it.
Okay, fair enough. I like that answer. So we orient to the fact that muscle must be protected. Hey, brother, it's much easier to gain fat than anything else, but it's more difficult to protect muscle. So if we orient to the fact that we must, if we want to age well, have healthy muscle and be strong. Okay, so this is what we know. We don't really care about body fat percentage, but we care about muscle. And then we go, okay, fine. What else do I need for health? Well, I want to create autophagy, because that's like the big thing. Because again, why else are people fasting? That's what I hear in the landscape, is that they want autophagy. Is there something else that you hear? Because I'll counterbalance that if there's something else.
I think that's the main thing, autophagy, but I do know that people use it to control calories, as a way to moderate their intake.
I love that.
But I do think autophagy would be like the biggest benefit. But I think a mistake with fasting is it's, essentially a way to control calories, which doesn't work in my mindset.
And also, most people are not successful at fasting to control calories.
Yeah, that's the biggest problem I see.
So to have fasting, I see what you're saying. So for example, fasting till noon and then eating from noon to 8, right?
Yeah.
Something like that? Okay. So let's say they're going for autophagy. You guys are like, is that a swear word? And I'm like, no. And it's this idea of cleaning out all cells. There's many different ways to achieve autophagy, like just eating a bit of it in a calorie restriction. It doesn't have to be this overt fasting or this idea of creating hormesis. You can exercise and create autophagy. So let's take the mechanistic piece off. But I like what you're saying in terms of let's control calories. And I would say I actually really like that. And we use fasting protocols in our medical clinic. So I'm still a practicing physician, like I mentioned. By the way, the name of the practice, Strong Medical.
Nice.
Got that sucker trademarked. Pretty cool. Anyway, I love the name. But when you think about fasting to control calories, then we're talking about intermittent time-restricted feeding. Now, can fasting help? This is a long-winded answer, but I think it's important, and we have a little bit of time. It's not 30 seconds of like an Instagram story. I like the idea of intermittent fasting to control calories. I'm totally on board with that. I have no problem. The reason the playbook has 1 to 2 hours of eating when you wake up, it doesn't have to be that way, but here's what I'm going for. I don't want to call you, Josh, and say, it's Tuesday, because just another Tuesday. What did you eat for breakfast last Tuesday? And you go, Doc, I ate, I don't know, I was like running around, and then I ate, I don't know, a protein bar and then half of a bagel. And I'm like, all right, Josh, we got to do better than that. And then I go, well, what did you eat Monday? And you go, oh, Monday, I don't know. I ate at McDonald's. They don't even have McDonald's in Toronto, but I ate at, I don't know, Tom, Dick, and Harry's, whatever it is. I want you to tell me exactly what you ate, and you might go, you know what, I don't know, but I had 30 grams of protein. I had 30 to 50 grams of protein because this is the way I do it, and I didn't really have any carbs, and then I had 4 grams of fat. I don't care what you do, but I do want to hear that protein part. So the reason we put that in the playbook is I want you to be so anchored in to what you said earlier, consistency. Mm-hmm. Okay, fine. Let's say you don't want to do that. The science says it doesn't really matter when that first meal is. So, I tend not to eat till 10 o'clock. But it's the first meal, which we'll call breakfast, but that timing could be at noon. That first meal has to have protein in it. Again, to help with muscle and support muscle, it's 30 to 50 grams to stimulate that tissue. Now, again, I hope I cleared that up. I'm not against fasting. Fasting for calorie control can work. It also can work for bowel rest. Great. But here's what I need from you, and here's what I need from everyone who is listening to this that is, thinking about how do we eat more impactfully? Like, what do we need to do? Well, I need you to design a life that supports muscle, right? Because strength and muscle mass doesn't just happen. You don't just stumble into lifetime and go, oh my God, I keep in here, I fell over and I'm jacked. But what happens is you have to think about how do we protect muscle. The longer you go without eating, there's 2 main ways to stimulate muscle: resistance training, mechanical tension, and dietary protein. So let's say you are someone who's not eating because you're fasting and then not training. Over time, what happens to that muscle? Well, over time, we remain in a catabolic state. It's more difficult for that 74-year-old. My dad was fasting. My dad's 74, 75 now. He was like on these 2-3 day fasts. I'm like, Dad, your skin is literally falling off your body. What are you? He's like, I'm getting ready for autophagy, and I used to be a wrestler, so I can do it. I'm like, Dad, I love that for you, but we're not fasting anymore because you are more mature. And I would say muscle changes over the age of 35. I think that people can fast from 35, but once you're starting to, maybe go through menopause, or maybe you're having your hormones shift, or maybe you're under more stress, and you're not regularly training, and you're not creating that force and that mechanical tension, you have to be able to pull that lever. So again, you can fast, but if you are older and you accelerate the loss of muscle, remember that story I told you about that patient that really changed everything for me? Mm-hmm. Where I looked at her brain and it was like the beginning of an Alzheimer's brain. Mm-hmm. She went through periods of fasting, weight loss, weight regain, weight loss, weight regain. What happens, your mom, do you think it's easy for her to put on muscle? I mean,
No.
My dad, I'm like Scarecrow.
Well, that's a misconception of how putting on muscle is so challenging. Like people think they can put on 10 pounds of muscle. It's hard work.
I wish I could.
Yeah,
you
me
and me
too.
both, right?
Yeah.
And so that's, again, what I want, and that's why I made the playbook, because you can do whatever you want as long as you have your standards and you know what the outcome is that you're looking for. Mm-hmm. And so for me, you have to protect muscle. And the evidence would say that it's more detrimental and more difficult to maintain that tissue as you age.
Yeah. Well, your playbook lays it out for you, like we've talked about. And the last two sections of your book are, how to move and how to recover. And it's to me, when I read it, it was so great, to help someone get started. But I want to jump ahead and ask you, when we think about recovery as well, there's a lot of hard-charging people that love to train hard all the time, and there's almost an element of, trying to force that person to slow down and to think about their recovery because, I would imagine you've had some overuse injuries. I like to train until I get hurt. That's like my motto. Unfortunately, how do you think about that person and how do you coach that person?
Okay, you got two options. Number one, you keep training and you keep getting hurt, and then one day you wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm like so busted up that you have this kind of aha moment. Like, hey, you're a total, you're just like a jerk. You're a jerk to yourself, right? Like, I don't know. For me, at least, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can barely move. Yeah. This is ridiculous. And so, again, if then I reorient to, there's my desire to train. Listen, I love to go hard, right? Like it's so uncomfortable for me to do like Shavasana and yoga. I'm like, please get me out of here. I'm out. But here's what I recognize is that is a rookie move. That the way in which you grow is not in the fight like you do, but you just have to pause because we're in this for more longevity. When you're really young, you can be reckless. Fine, go ahead. Enjoy it while you can. But then I also think about, look at all the kids that get injured and they're out of sport forever because they're so focused in this one unidimensional way. And again, when we think about what is it that this is all about, like what is it that you're doing? You know what is the company's purpose? Do you guys have a mission statement?
Yeah, I think for us, we think of ourselves providing nutrition-focused food to fuel our community.
Okay, nailed it. Fist bump. We talk about training and we talk about protein, but you know what, my friend? Do you know what we're really talking about? What we're really talking, this is like the gateway. It is the gateway to building stronger, more resilient humans. So my kids can play with your kids. Mm-hmm. And so they can get after it, but then they can also come back and pause and be like, all right, what are we doing? What direction are we going? How are we going to support the other generation? Like, how can we move forward in a way? Because at some point, the bells and whistles of being hard charging, like I watched my dad in the gym. This was so ridiculous. I was like, oh my God, this is where I get it. I've never told this story. So my dad lives in Ecuador. I hate visiting him. I love my dad. We're very close. Do you know why I hate visiting him? Oh, it's brutal. Do you know? I might have said this once. I've said this before. So I hate visiting my dad, and I'm sorry. I love my dad, but if it's 4 hours or less, we have to walk. We have to go to the I was like, Dad, what's taking so long? He's like, oh, I'm walking to the airport. I'm like, dude, you've lost your mind. He's like, if it's 4 hours or less, we're walking.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So I brought him to the gym. I train, which you should come. You and your family should come because I think that we should open a spot in Houston. I will be a great customer. It'll be so amazing. Like, we don't really have anything there. And anyway, he was in the gym. I trained. So my trainer, Carlos Mata, I hate him. I have to finish my workout if I'm late, because sometimes I'm late with the kids or whatever. So if it's set for an hour and I get there at 15 minutes late, I still have to finish the workout. It's terrible, especially if it's like a Metcon. And then my 75-year-old dad is like, okay, well, I'm going to do your workout with you. And there was no quit in this man. I'm like, he's going to, wait, what is he doing? He's jumping off the box. He's doing battle ropes. Like, I don't even know the last time he did it. And I was mortified because he was so set on going hard that I'm like, oh my God, I have to like leave. Otherwise, my sister's going to kill me because something's going to happen to dad. And I realized in this moment that there was no, pull in case of emergency. There was no off valve. There was no, well, this is how we recover. And I guess part of me is being a little unfair because he does wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and then he does Tai Chi and he does all this other stuff. But I say all this because recovery is actually part of the growth process. And if you don't figure out where like your limits are, your brain has to keep up with your body, then if you continue to push in this direction, and this is not to persuade people to not train hard and get after it. Like, don't. Do it, but you have to do it consciously. Otherwise, you're going to listen to the landscape and you're going to go out and you're going to get after it and you're going to lift heavy and you haven't lifted for 10 years and you're in your mid-50s and you've just blown out your shoulder. So recovery is important, and we do have foundational recovery tools in there. So there's a foundational 5, which I think that you should do.
I love them. I'm going to start doing them.
It's amazing. And so this was created, again, I'm very clear as to where my area of expertise is. And so I called some of the best in the business to help me come up with these protocols. And Dr. Gerard D'Onofrio, you guys should mark his name because he's a superstar. He's an incredible physician, fellowship trained. And he created ways, it's not just about training hard in the moment, but then how are you taking care of yourself? Recovery is not just laying on the sofa eating, watching Landman and eating air pop popcorn. It's moving and putting in protocols for heat and for cold and for rest.
It's great. Dr. Gabrielle, aging strong versus aging weak. You've created this playbook for us, so thank you for that. And you've created a path for aging strong. It's so great, so inspiring to speak with you. Great to get to know you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for caring about our future.
Thanks.